Hey everyone, Editor THC here. Before we start today's video, I do want to preface that this is going to be kind of a long one, and I hope y'all do enjoy the video. Also, viewer discretion is advised for some heavy topics. And as always, I am a legal patient under the Teacup program in the state of Texas, and these videos are just for educational purposes only. Thank you. Cannabis. A plant so versatile, yet so stigmatized. Beautiful, yet so hated by the people it benefits. When did the usage of cannabis for its high start? Was it the ancient Egyptians who started it? Or was it Israelites in the kingdom of Judah? And when the fuck did people start hating it so much? To find that out, we have to go back in time to the ancient Chinese. Around 2500 BCE, the ancient Chinese valued cannabis plants for their fibers, which would be turned into things like rope, used for its seeds, and eventually for its psychoactive purposes. See, the Chinese were originally not knowing of its psychoactive effects, as they would trim the plant of its flowers and leaves, only leaving the stalks of the plant, which were then processed into fibers. They would use the flowers and leaves as compost or even as feed for some of their livestock. It was only around 500 BCE that the Chinese started using cannabis for its medicinal purposes, often using it as an anti-inflammatory aid. Meanwhile, in ancient Egypt, cannabis was being used for its recreational and ritualistic purposes. The Egyptians would burn cannabis flowers at funerals, much like the Chinese. They would also use the fibers, but what's unique about the Egyptians is they figured out how to make the first known extract of cannabis, called hashish or hash. Okay, Editor T here. This may or may not be true. It's disputed since the invention of hash predates written history, so some scientists point to the Neolithic era, some point to ancient Chinese and Persians, and some point to ancient Egypt and the Middle East. So, just keep that in mind. Eventually, through trade with foreign nations and introducing customs to other people, the use of cannabis spread to the Greeks and Scythians, where they would use cannabis for medicinal purposes and their steam baths. Okay, another intermission. I would like to point out how hilarious it is to think that Greek god-looking men were essentially the first people to hotbox. Many of the bathhouses, if y'all don't know this, were not open-door establishments, which means they were using cannabis bath bombs that would get them blasted and would smoke out the entire fucking room. The Scythians would be some of the first people to use cannabis for frenzied states and mental disorders, as they saw that it calmed down people immensely. Who would have thought? The Scythians also used hash made by the Egyptians as a recreational substance. Now, here's where the history starts getting a little confusing, so we're gonna rapid fire this. In 1230 AD, the Persians introduced hash to the Middle East. In 1320 AD, Bantu settlers from India brought both cannabis seeds and hashish to southern Africa. Then Bantu and Khoisan settlers who moved from South Africa to European settlements in 1652 introduced cannabis as a whole to the whites in Europe, who then gentrified it about 400 years later. Okay, so this is a really stupid joke. I'm very sorry. By the 1850s, Swahili settlers had brought cannabis to the east coast of Africa and to the Congo in the west. Now rewinding once again, in the 1500s, early Florida settler Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca noted that the Native American tribes would smoke the wild hemp that grew in the fields of what would now be modern-day Florida. Now, fast forward to the early 1800s. Cannabis was starting to be banned in many nations, including most of Africa, many countries in the Middle East, and even most European countries. But in what is now the United States, people were growing Indian and English strains of hemp for both industrial uses and recreational uses. Because of this, in 1925, during the International Conference in Geneva, yes, the same Geneva that would go on to be where we wrote most of our international wartime law, would have hearings where the committee banned all exportation of Indian hemp to countries that had since banned it. About 12 years later, in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which prohibited the production of all cannabis and hemp products. A good part of this came with propaganda that was created to paint marijuana as a drug that makes you psychotic, makes you go crazy, and could kill you in one puff, along with pushing weed onto marginalized communities, many of which were Black and Hispanic people. This was a clear point where the racism behind making weed illegal shows, shortly followed after by a complete 180 on industrial hemp, as during World War II, most uniforms were made using hemp. Later on in the 1970s, under the Nixon administration, the Controlled Substance Act was passed, officially banning weed among many other drugs from any use in the United States. This was done using the same tactics that the US government had used back in the 1930s, pointing out false claims of severe adverse side effects, along with associating it with hippies who had been protesting against the Vietnam War. Those who were supported by armed activist groups like the Black Panthers were also targeted. This caused the government to associate heroin with black people and cannabis with hippies, which in turn, by making it illegal, they made it to where they could arrest the leaders of these movements under the guise of them being psychotic drug addicts, when in reality, black people didn't really use heroin, and weed is now known to not cause any of those symptoms within the majority of people. And if you do not believe me about the illegality of weed being racist, here's a direct quote from one of Nixon's admin members, the Chief of Domestic Policy, John Ehrlichman. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, Ehrlichman said. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. This direct quote is evidence that the Nixon admin had ulterior motives other than protecting the people. They wanted the war to keep going because it was driving the economy straight into the sky and right into their pockets. Nixon was known for creating legislature that would put money in his pockets and his subsidiaries. Fortunately, shortly after, 3 years to be exact, Oregon would be the first state to decriminalize cannabis usage, followed by Alaska, Maine, California, Colorado, and Ohio in 1975, then Minnesota in 1976, Mississippi, New York, and North Carolina in 1977, and Nebraska in 1978. Efforts then slowed down for the rest of the 20th century, until after the turn of the millennium, as in 2008, Massachusetts decriminalized weed, followed by Connecticut in 2011, Rhode Island in 2012, Vermont in 2013, with Maryland, Missouri, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Virgin Islands in 2014. That's where my girlfriend's from. Delaware followed close by in 2015, then in 2016, Illinois, Michigan, Nevada, and even Maine moved to legalize it. In 2018, the Farm Bill was passed which legalized all forms of hemp products as long as they contain no more than 0.3% Delta-9 THC within them. This started a boom in the hemp industry with brands starting to make THCA, Delta-8, Delta-10, and other alternate cannabinoid cannabis products that would be psychoactive, but still completely legal. I also forgot to mention that many states also medically legalized marijuana use, including Texas, which legalized low-THC medicinal cannabis in 2015 under the Texas Compassionate Use Program, in which they had legalized low-THC edibles, topicals, RSOs, distillate syringes, and with the recent passage of House Bill 46 in the 89th session of the Texas legislature, vaporizers and pulmonary inhalation devices like inhalers. This is a huge step forward towards total legalization in the state, which I am extremely excited for myself considering I live in Texas. Now, let's rewind just a little bit. About 12 years ago, in 2013, a man named William Kind Bill Fenger, a hash maker, wanted to make a concentrate that smelled, tasted, and felt like a freshly trimmed flower without losing the terpenes, as in the curing process, cannabis can lose up to 95% of its terpenes. Prior, many people had tried to make fresh frozen butane hash oil, or BHO, but got unsatisfactory results. William designed a contraption in which he used butane to extract the cannabinoids and terps to much success. The first strain he did it with was Original Sour Diesel, a rare cut from Florida. Shortly after, in 2015, a man in California named Phil Salazar, also known as Soil Grown, accidentally stumbled upon the process that is now referred to as rosin tech, a process in which hash is squished at a high temp to produce a liquid called rosin. This process blew up shortly after he discovered it and created one of the most premium cannabis extracts money can buy, called ice water hash rosin, a high THC extract that requires zero solvents, retains all of the trace cannabinoids and the terpenes, which creates a well-rounded yet potent extract that is extremely faithful to the original. And now, here we are. Over 7,000 years after we first saw signs of cannabis use, cannabis is now in the forefront of lawmaking within many nations, not just the US, but Europe, Asian, and even oceanic countries and African countries are looking at possible legalization laws in the near future. What was a dirty history of prejudice, lies, and deceit comes hope that we will have access to a medicine and that we soon will see weed receive the flowers it deserves. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want to see more like it, please feel free to like the video, subscribe, and tell me what you want to see down in the comments. See ya.